You're not going to believe what happened when a nosy HOA board member, who everyone in the neighborhood calls Karen decided to call the cops on me over my supposedly messy garage. I had just come back from a long work trip, and yeah, I'll admit, the garage wasn't exactly Pinterest perfect. Boxes, some old furniture, and a couple of storage bins were out of place, but nothing crazy. Still, that was enough for her to march over with her phone, snapping pictures and threatening to report me to the HOA. Again. Next thing I know, there are 2 police officers knocking on my door. At first, I thought it was just a warning or a fine, something routine. But the moment they stepped into the garage, everything shifted. One of the officers paused, pointed to a box in the corner, and radioed for backup. I had no idea what was going on. My heart was racing, and Karen was standing in the driveway with her arms crossed, smirking like she'd finally won. But that smug look didn't last long, because what the cops found in my garage didn't belong to me, and it definitely wasn't trash. Let's just say it wasn't long before their attention turned away from me and straight toward her. You're going to want to hear how this wild story unfolds. So here's where things started to get really strange. The box the officer pointed at was taped shut, shoved behind some old camping gear I hadn't touched in months. I had no idea what was inside, and I told them that. But they didn't waste any time. One of them put on gloves, carefully opened it, and inside was several handbags, electronics and jewelry, some with store tags still attached. I was shocked, completely confused. None of that stuff was mine. Karen's smirk faded fast when the officers started asking questions. She went from confident to nervous in seconds, claiming she didn't know anything, had never seen the box before. But the officers weren't buying it. One of them stepped outside to make a call, and the other started checking serial numbers on the electronics. The tension in the air was unreal. Meanwhile, I just stood there, trying to figure out how stolen goods ended up in my garage. I hadn't had anyone over in weeks, and I barely even used the space except for storage. Then I remembered the side gate. It doesn't always latch properly, and Karen had access to the HOA's maintenance keys. Suddenly, things started making a lot more sense. But if what I was thinking was true, this wasn't just petty neighborhood drama anymore. It was something much bigger. As the officers continued to sift through the contents of the box, Karen started pacing in the driveway, her hands fidgeting. She kept muttering to herself, like she was trying to come up with an excuse that would make everything disappear. But nothing was making sense. How could she have not known about the box? She had been in my yard plenty of times, walking by that gate I had mentioned. Maybe she had a key to the maintenance area, maybe more than just the gate. I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't just some petty HOA member who liked to complain. This felt like something deeper, something planned. I'd always thought she was a little too involved in everyone's business, but it never crossed my mind that she could be involved in something like this. Was she using her position to get access to properties, or was she targeting specific people in the neighborhood? That's when it hit me. She knew too much about everyone's schedules, about when we were home or away. As the officers took photos and gathered evidence, I overheard them talking about another recent theft in the neighborhood, one that had been dismissed as a random burglary. But the items in my garage didn't seem random. They were organized, almost like they'd been carefully stashed away. I tried to calm myself, but something told me this wasn't just a coincidence. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Karen had probably been keeping an eye on me for a while. I had a feeling this was only the beginning of something much bigger, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. The officers were starting to piece things together, and the tension in the air felt like it could snap at any moment. Karen was no longer pacing. She was standing completely still now, her eyes darting around as if trying to find a way out of this mess. I could see her mind racing, calculating her next move, but she wasn't getting far. Not with the officers asking her questions about the items in my garage, or why they were hidden so carefully behind that old camping gear. The longer they stayed, the more I felt like something was off. The police were clearly onto her, but she wasn't breaking down like I expected. Instead, she just kept glancing at her phone, almost like she was waiting for a signal, a distraction, anything to keep her calm. I watched as she typed something quickly, her fingers moving frantically. That's when I realized she wasn't just trying to cover up her own tracks, she was trying to make sure no one else found out. I felt my heart skip a beat as one of the officers walked toward her, asking her to step aside. They needed to search her car. She wasn't getting away this time. Karen's face paled as she mumbled about needing to leave and things to take care of. But it was too late. The tension was unbearable now, and as I watched, I couldn't help but wonder if I was about to witness something even darker unravel. What was she hiding, and how far was she willing to go to protect her secrets? The cops had already called in backup. Something big was coming, and I could feel it. Just as the backup officers arrived, a car screeched to a halt in front of my house. I turned to see a man jump out, wearing a dark hoodie and looking around nervously. My stomach dropped when I recognized him. He was someone from the neighborhood. A guy who had always kept to himself, never really talked to anyone. I'd seen him a few times at HOA meetings, but he always seemed to disappear when things got awkward. I never thought much of it, but now I couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow connected to Karen. The officers spotted him too. They moved toward him quickly, blocking his path before he could reach Karen. I could see his eyes darting back and forth, trying to figure out how to get away without drawing attention. One of the officers asked him to stay put, and that's when things took a strange turn. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded-up paper. Without even thinking, he handed it to the officer, his face pale. The officer unfolded it slowly, his eyes scanning the contents before looking back at the man, then at Karen. My heart was racing, and I could feel the weight of whatever was on that paper settling in my chest. Was it a confession? A secret deal? Suddenly, everything was spiraling. This wasn't just about a messy garage anymore. This was starting to look like a coordinated operation. The stolen goods, the suspicious behavior, the mystery man showing up right on cue. Was Karen running a bigger operation than I could have ever imagined? And what was on that paper? I was no longer just a bystander in this situation. I could feel myself being pulled deeper into something I wasn't ready for, and I had no idea how much more I could take before it all came crashing down. The officer unfolded the paper fully, and what was written on it sent a chill down my spine. It was a list, several names, including mine. But it wasn't just a list of names, it was a detailed log, showing dates and times when people were away from their homes. It was clear now. Karen wasn't just some nosy neighbor. She was orchestrating something far more elaborate, using her position in the HOA to keep tabs on everyone in the neighborhood, watching for the right moment to strike. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My stomach turned as the officer stepped closer to Karen, holding the list up. Karen's face drained of color. She started to backpedal, stammering about how she didn't know about the log, how it wasn't hers. But it was too late. The officer's tone shifted, sharp and professional. He asked her to come with him. But just as Karen opened her mouth to protest, she froze. I turned to see the man in the hoodie moving quickly toward the back of the house, but I didn't even get a chance to react before the officers followed him. He didn't get far. One of the officers shouted for him to stop, and the rest of the team descended on him. The guy's expression shifted from nervousness to shock as they tackled him to the ground. His bag fell open, spilling more stolen electronics, jewelry, and even a few pricey watches. It was clear now, this wasn't just a small-time operation. But then, just as everything seemed like it was finally coming together, Karen looked at me one last time. Her eyes weren't full of fear, though. No, there was something more unsettling, something calculating. She leaned in, just loud enough for me to hear, and whispered, "You have no idea how deep this goes. This was never about your garage." Suddenly, the ground beneath me felt like it was shifting. I had no idea what she meant, but I had a horrible feeling that the story wasn't over yet. The officers quickly arrested Karen and the man in the hoodie, taking them away while I stood there, still processing everything that had just unfolded. The stolen goods were catalogued, the evidence was clear, and the neighborhood was safe once again. But Karen's final words kept echoing in my mind. You have no idea how deep this goes. It wasn't until later that I learned the truth. Karen had been running an elaborate theft ring, using her HOA position to gather intel on people's schedules, breaking into homes when they were away, and selling stolen goods through underground channels. The guy in the hoodie was one of her accomplices, a low-level player who helped move the items. It turned out that my messy garage had been the perfect hiding spot, just a place where they'd stash things temporarily before moving them elsewhere. As the investigation wrapped up, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and disbelief. What started as a petty HOA complaint had uncovered a much bigger scheme, and I never would have suspected Karen to be behind it all. The neighborhood felt safer, but there was a lingering question in the back of my mind. How many other people like Karen were out there, hiding in plain sight? In the end, I learned not to underestimate anyone, and sometimes the messiest situations can reveal the biggest truths.